Grow.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to Technology Envoy channel. Today we got something kind of special. It's going to be a little bit more fun. Gonna I'm calling it racing experiences or machining and racing experiences. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, and then also we're going to talk about Brendan's background and just show you some pictures and just sort of talk about stuff. We're probably going to learn from each other actually a bunch of things here as well too. So thanks for coming on, Brendan.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Eddie, for inviting me.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just go to the slides and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay, let's just make this the whole screen.
There we go.
So this is the first slide. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just go to the pictures. How about
Actually, go to back to the top because it's actually the writing that I wanted them to see. So I'll talk a little bit about my background. In 1986, I graduated with an honors diploma in mechanical engineering technology. And one of the first jobs that I did was at this place called Reliable. It was actually called Reliable Engine Services at the time when I worked there. And I think they've got it wrong here actually in their information. But it was one of the largest machine shops in North America for doing heavy industrial type things. I think the only bigger shops that would be in North America were probably in Houston because Edmonton is the most northernest city where the oil field is. So it's a huge industrial city essentially, and that's where I took my mechanical engineering technology. And my first job was I was the quality control engineer at Reliable Engine Services, this huge facility. And one of the things that I did was I worked with Dr. Robert, I think it was Dr. Ball. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Ball, and he was a PhD of metallurgy. And my job as quality control engineer was to work directly with him. And we had a chrome shop. It's called industrial hard chroming. And when you want to build up surfaces on a crankshaft, for example, you turn it down, make it nice and round again, and then you build it up with this chrome process, hard chroming process, which is these big giant tanks, and then you have the power going into them. So it's like electroplating kind of sort of process. And then once you do that, you take them out and then you machine everything back to specifications. So what we did a whole number of things, but one of the things that I was responsible for directly was we rebuilt train cylinders and crankshafts. So I was the liaison between CP Rail and our company basically on this project for us to rebuild cylinders and crankshafts for trains, essentially. So we had I believe it was the largest crank grinder in North America for doing this kind of thing. And we would have the boats would come into Vancouver broken down, they'd take them apart, and then they'd send the stuff to us. And it was my responsibility to look at everything and say, okay, we need to do this, and this to get it back to specifications. And then they would ship it back and have it, reinstalled in the ship. And I'm talking about huge super tankers and huge cargo ships and stuff like that. Some of these crankshafts were I can remember them being in three sections and they're 12 feet long. So that's 36 feet of crankshaft. And our crank grinder, we could go to 75 feet. So we had a very special facility there. That was Reliable Engine Services. And so we can go on to the next one, Brandon. So what happened after working at Reliable Engine Services and one other place that I'll talk about a little bit. After Reliable Engine Services, I actually worked as a machinist and spray welder at another place that actually was connected to building or rebuilding these crankshafts and cylinders. And after that, because my father was part of NORAD during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and because of my honors diploma in mechanical engineering technology, I approached the military and I wanted to go into the Air Force or something like that because my father was part of it during the NORAD. But they didn't have anything for me. So they actually put me into the Special Navy program. And eventually I didn't finish the program, but I went in there to learn a lot about what's going on, I guess. And down the road, this happened in 2021, a NORAD pilot friend of mine and someone else sent me this honorary Space Force emblem, which was really, really cool. They know about some of the anti-gravity stuff that I'm doing with subquantum kinetics and whatnot. So yeah, so they sent that to me, and so it's kind of my military connection. And at this point, I kind of wanted to talk to Brandon a little bit more about his connection, because we were talking the other day, and I was talking about NORAD, and Brandon brought up a fact that his PhD was basically paid by the equivalent of NORAD in England. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that, and also maybe tell us about your degrees and everything?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Eddie. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did a BSc at Hertfordshire University, University of Hertfordshire, around about 1999 to 2022. That was a BSc honors in physics,
Yep.
experimentation and theory. Then I went on to do a master's degree, Master of Science in particle physics at Royal Holloway.
Yep.
That was about 2 years, from 2002 to 2004.
Okay.
And then I did I did a bit of work in mental health, sort of volunteering in a day center, and I
Hmm.
was a trustee of the mental health charity, sort of like
Oh,
making
that's
important
cool.
making important decisions, helping out with important decisions for the trust for the charity, such as it's more the political side of it. And
Yep.
I was vice chairman there as well, a little bit for 1 year. And then I
Right.
went when I went back to working as a PhD student at University College London, and I was working on electromagnetism and tomography, so magnetic induction tomography. So a new type
Yeah.
of system that we developed. Started off sort of volunteering for a few months, and then we converted it into a PhD. So I is a new type of system which we developed ourselves. Although we didn't know so much, we didn't realize there was a whole field, there was a small field already existence.
Right.
So we were able to develop it from scratch, our own system, which is
And
basically go on.
and this device was to sense radiation or radioactive particles and materials coming in and out of a country or anything
Yeah,
like that,
Magnus,
essentially.
it was funded by AWE, Atomic Weapons Establishment, that they
Which
look
is
after.
like, which sorry, Brendan, which is like NORAD, just so those other people don't understand. It's basically kind of like the equivalent of the nuclear missile for defense for North America, but it's for England essentially.
Yes,
Essentially.
they look after, they maintain and look after the country's Trident missiles,
There
and
you go.
their
Yep.
atomic weapons establishment, and
Yep.
one of their guys had contacted the professor of my program and wanted to do a PhD in a similar field that he had done his PhD in, which was tomography and magnetic induction tomography, which is
Yep.
basically based on the set principle of a metal detector, except imaging inside, imaging underground, or image. What we did was to image inside metallic enclosures, imaging metal objects inside metallic enclosures. And
Right. Right.
was basically the end goal for AWE was to develop a device to detect nuclear materials coming through customs.
Wow. So and
And
that's what you did that's what you did your PhD
so I
and
didn't actually do that exactly, but I was developing a system There would
Yeah.
eventually be one of many. They had many different types of detections, like
Yeah.
muon detection or X-ray
Yep.
detection. But the magnetic induction tomography was the one they wanted to develop as well as one of the types of detection mechanisms for or devices for detecting nuclear materials being smuggled through customs.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think in talking to you, my understanding is that the AWE, the Atomic Weapons Establishment, actually funded your PhD.
Yeah, they funded it. The home of MOD, the Home Office, and AWE funded it.
So MOD, Ministry of Defense?
Ministry of Defense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, and so
So
my dad, yeah, basically kind of the same exact kind of thing that my dad worked on. He was a radar guy on the DEW line, but it's still the same sort of group,
yeah,
essentially.
they're not just involved in looking after the country's Trident nuclear missiles. They also have a separate committee that works towards decommissioning nuclear weapons. If that,
Oh,
so they also work towards a
that's
possibility
awesome.
of decommissioning nuclear weapons and reducing them, and that kind of
And
thing.
and we know from all our Ken Shoulders research that, and talking to Chris Beskar, the CEO of Stavati Aerospace, Chris told me that they can deradiate nuclear waste using charge clusters within like 48 hours. So that's really cool. Let's go on to the next one and see what we've got here. We've got a whole bunch of them to share with you guys today. So the other day, Brendan had actually asked me what was on my shirt. And that's also part of the reason why we're doing this. I it was probably about 10 years ago. I worked about 10 years ago. I worked for about 10 years for Lordco, and Lordco is a really large auto parts place all through British Columbia. And my job was performance. So a lot of the machining skills that I have all had to do with racing and performance when I was younger, and even now. So that's kind of why we're kind of jumping into this and starting to talk a little bit about some of my racing background and heritage and how it relates to everything that we're doing now, and especially the machining part of everything. So that's Lordco. Let's see what else we have. So this is the type of thing that we would do. This is the guy in the black shirt actually worked for, I managed a machine shop that had a machine shop, a fabrication shop, and an automotive repair shop all in one. And the guy in the black shirt, he basically bought the machine shop and then took everything and set it up again, and then started doing his thing. And this is the type of thing that he would do. So this is about a 3,500 horsepower alcohol motor that was put into the gentleman in the gray shirt's dragster. And if you just scroll a little bit, you'll see the dragster in the picture at the bottom there. So that motor was put into this dragster, and I believe it went 6.02 or something. I can't see with my glasses, but something like that. It was very, very fast, very, very fast car. So that's the type of thing that would be the really high end part of things. That motor is probably well in excess of $100,000.
The
Very, very
602 miles an hour. Is that right? Kilometers an hour.
miles per hour. Yeah, that would be miles. So 602 seconds in the quarter mile. And what is the mile per hour again?
Sorry?
The mile per hour? Because I can't see the.
You mean this bit here, this logo where it
Yeah, it
says
says 602, and what's below it?
22871.
So 228 miles an hour is what that is. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's the type of thing that we did. And again, this is the more high end thing. We built a lot of engines for muscle cars, show cars, even 4x4s, that type of thing, but everything very high performance. Yeah, so let's see what else we have here, Brandon. Okay, so my heritage does go back to racing, but it really goes back to racing two strokes. So that bike that I'm on, doing the wheelies on, that was basically a track bike a two-stroke track bike that was insanely fast. It would wheelie into almost all the gears essentially. Like you could be shifting, into sixth gear at 140 miles an hour, and the thing is trying to wheelie, right? It was a very, very fast bike meant for the track. There's also a picture of me and my best friend Al in the Canadian helicopter, and we'll go back and talk a little bit more about that down the road. But so basically, a lot of my machining skills had to do with modifying two strokes, especially, but also four strokes. But two strokes I specialized in, modifying them and porting and polishing them and modifying them to make way more horsepower than they would normally make for racing purposes. So that was always my passion. It still is to this day, engine building and whatnot. So let's see what else we have here, Brendan. Okay, so the bike in with the wheelies, it was so wheelie bound that it was very, very hard to ride. So a good friend of mine and his brother actually took that exact same motor, exactly the same motor that we had built, and built this drag bike so that it's got a wheelie bar. Now it can't wheelie. This bike was really fast. I can't remember how fast it was, but I think it was in the low tens or even in the high 9-second bracket, which is insanely fast. Lot of fun. I never got a chance to ride that bike. I wish I would have. But yeah, they built that, and they built that in a place called Eghorn Welding in Edmonton, and that was a place where they did aircraft welding. So TIG welding and whatnot, some of the best welding in the world, essentially. So that was the brothers that did that. Let's see what else we have, Brendan. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about my early childhood and snowmobiles. I ended up being quite a good rider, and eventually I got enough money to buy my own race sleds, and this was one of them. That wasn't my first one, but this was one of them. And this is a type of snowmobile that you cannot buy. It comes from the factory as a race sled. It's not for anybody to buy. You have to know people to get them and whatnot. So this was one of them that I had back in the day. It was a 245 Blizzard, was what it was. Meant for oval track racing on the ice, essentially, for going round and round on the ice, essentially. And then I think the next picture is the same type of snowmobile, but this one was a 340, so it was bigger. And this one was a supermod. And what a supermod is it's a factory, and this was a Rotax, so it's Bombardier or Skidoo. It's a factory Rotax race sled, which meant that only the factory riders could have them. So there would only be like 3 or 4 people that would ever have these and ride them. And how I got this one was I was a pretty good rider, but I was never a factory rider, but it was like a hand-me-down. So I think I got this in 1980, and it was a 1976 model. So this was like a 4-year-old race sled, essentially. They probably raced it for a couple of years and then put it aside. And then eventually I got it, the Amsoil Racer. So again, for ice racing, very, very, very fast snowmobile. This one revved to 13,500 RPM. It revved to the moon, as we say. Very, very fast one. So then, what else have we got here? So that led into, this is my current ride, and this is the fastest production snowmobile in the world that has ever been built. They don't make them anymore. This is a hill climb snowmobile meant for climbing straight up the steepest peak that you could ever imagine. I've been to the top of mountains so many times, I can't even count, with this snowmobile because it is so capable. In fact, when I was back at the ski hill and stuff, we would use this to go into places where most riders couldn't go. But because I was a good rider and I had a very capable sled, I was able to go in. And sometimes we were actually searching for people because, search and rescue and whatnot. People get lost out there. I do remember doing one search and rescue, although it wasn't really a search and rescue. I just rescued the snowmobile using that one day. And I think the next picture is going to be the motor in it. And the motor is very special. This is 1,000 cc Suzuki racing triple. So 3-cylinder racing triple, very high RPM. It revs well past 10,000 RPM. It's highly modified. In its stock form, I think they had 172 horsepower, which is a ton of horsepower. This one, in its current, the way it sits there, is about 250 horsepower. So very, very capable. And it's got all the modifications. It's got race pipes on it. It was ported, and every single thing that you could ever imagine was done to this one. So that's my current ride. And this is an interesting project. When I worked at Lordco, the performance place, we were a Turbonetics dealer. And I always wanted to modify that engine that you just saw in that picture to have a turbocharger on it. So I actually had Turbonetics design a custom turbocharger for me for this project. And this is the dyno sheet that came out of it. So, and I was very conservative with my numbers. In fact, I started at 200 horsepower. And then with 25 pounds of boost, which is what happens when you use a turbo, this one made 465 horsepower. So, almost double the horsepower that it's at. And that's 465 horsepower at altitude. That's a working like 8,000 feet or higher, or at least a mile higher. Because when you're climbing mountains, you're always at higher altitude. The air is a lot thinner, so the engines make less horsepower. So turbochargers are one of the things that you can use to help to make more horsepower. I haven't done this modification yet. The snowmobile is the way that it sits in the other picture. I just wanted to show that to you.
Eddie, I thought I'd mention that how we got involved with the Starburst Foundation and the Model G group.
Yeah, definitely.
So after I did my PhD, I did some postdoctoral work for about a year, and then I did a honorary research associate or postdoc. So I did about two, and then I really wanted to work on subquantum kinetics for a PhD, but I realized that didn't look like it was going to happen. So, and during my second postdoc, the honorary research associate, I contacted Paul Laviolette because I'd known about him and heard about him and watched him on video on Project Camelot in 2010. Mm-hmm. So I found his email, contacted him, and asked him if I could do some voluntary work for him. Cool. And he was interested, and so he gave me the emails of people who were interested in doing work, or who had expressed interest in helping out. Yep. And then I set up the Model G Vortical Motion group because Dr. Paul Laviolette was quite interested in trying to develop particle spin into his model, so he could explain magnetism within subquantum kinetics.
Yep.
So we went to that was in February 2018. And in round about December 2000, so communicating by email and via the Facebook web group page. And then in December 2018, we got onto Zoom, like we've got a Zoom session here. So we started on Zoom, and we met for about 5 years. Paul Laviolette came to most of the groups, and I was doing a certain amount of simulation work, trying to simulate Model G and incorporate vortical motion, which we didn't quite do, but we learned a lot about the simulation, and we were able to get particles colliding with each other and accelerating.
And that was every weekend too that you met.
That was every Sunday we were meeting, but we were communicating during the week as well.
Yep.
And cool. I don't want to necessarily mention names just on this one, but of the group members, but Paul Laviolette came to most of the meetings. I mean, he was dealing with cancer at the time, and he was also traveling around the world, going to conferences and doing experiments with people.
Yeah.
And then in December 19th, 2022, he eventually passed away. He had stopped coming for about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
When he was getting quite unwell. And then unfortunately, so he passed away on the 19th of December 22, and Eddie came to the group around about 2023.
Yeah. Yep.
2023. So in January 23, they wanted me I was voted to be CEO, president of Starburst Foundation, take over from
Yeah.
Paul because Paul was no longer here.
Yep.
And we continued the Starburst Foundation, and we also met up on every Sunday, which is now Saturday, and then after a
And
while with the Model G group, we decided to create a Sunday group, which
yeah.
basically Eddie has made his group and he runs it, and that's
Yeah.
more to do with um, uh, exotic vacuum objects and Ken shoulders and consciousness,
Charged clusters and conscious. Yeah.
free energy, and sometimes talking about extraterrestrials and things like this. So it's
Yeah.
more open discussion, but mostly centered around exotic vacuum objects and Ken Shoulders' work.
Yeah. And
And
before Paul passed away, I did have the honor to contact him a couple times, um, just by email and stuff. And one of the things that I said to him one day, I said, "You, sir, are the second smartest man to set foot on terra firma. Of course, Tesla being the first." And I kind of nicknamed him Tesla 2.0 at that part, because I feel that subquantum kinetics literally finishes Tesla's work, or at least it's or on the right track to finishing Tesla's work, because there's still work to be done, of course. And that's why we do this, and we're talking about all this. And so it's a great honor to have you, the CEO of the Starburst Foundation, doing all this with me too. So thank you, Brendan.
yeah, okay, no problem. And also Eddie joined the foundation, so we've got a number of people who came along. Some of them came along a bit later, and they joined.
Yeah.
And
And what is my title? Because I know I'm on the board of directors.
you
I just
are
can't
you
remember.
are first assistant secretary and first assistant vice president.
Wow. Yeah, that's an honor. And I know that Tom Vallone is the
Ron is the second vice president, and
second. Yep.
um, uh, Theo Murphy is the first vice president.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just an honor to be with you guys and to be
Yeah,
talking about all this stuff, right?
and
Yeah.
it's a registered non-profit institute, scientific research institute, non-profit.
Probably the greatest research institute that there is, I believe, anyways, in my heart. Yeah. Let's get back, and we'll thank you for all of that, Brendan. Yeah, because that's the kind of information that we want to let people know about, right? Definitely. Our connections back to
So it's an ether. Paul was dealing with an ether-based physics that could explain things like anti-gravity and
yep.
over unity energy. Couldn't explain couldn't explain every free energy device, but explained quite a number of them. And it's basically it's describing an open system where energy can come from the ether. Some people say a higher dimension, but the ether. So it's an open system which can disobey the conventional laws of thermodynamics.
Definitely.
And then goes into explaining free energy and anti-gravity.
Yeah, and Paul wrote the most famous anti-gravity book, I think, in history. It's called Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And it basically explains how the B2 works antigravitically. It's an excellent book. I recommend everyone to have a look at that. In fact, it was I wrote part of how I ended up getting into the Starburst Foundation was in 2017. I wrote 80 pages of handwritten notes from Paul's work on subquantum kinetics, mostly to do with anti-gravity and free energy. And I believe that you guys saw that, and that was also part of the reason why I was asked in.
Yeah, so I think you met up. You also met up with Justin in one of these. I think it was APEC, and he invited you in. And then
that's right.
That was around about sometime in 2023.
Yeah, Justin was doing a APEC presentation, and I saw it, and I contacted him, and within I mean, it was within a few hours you guys had actually invited me in, so it was a a great honor again, definitely. And
But it's a great honor to have you as well, Eddie, because you've
yeah,
contributed
thank you.
a lot.
And
You
and
know,
we're standing on the shoulders of giants, Nikola Tesla and Paul Laviolette, um, Ken Shoulders, Pete Peterson.
mm,
All of these guys were, these are the guys these are the pioneers, literally. Yeah,
mhm.
all of them are. And Paul, yeah, he was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, yeah. So let's see what else we have here to show everyone. So not only did I race dirt bikes, road race, snowmobiles, hill climbed, I also had one of these. That's not me in the picture, but that's exactly what I had, ripping it up. And this is called a Honda Pilot. I think they were made in like 1989, 1990 zone. And basically, it's a Formula One car for the bush or for off-roading. Again, insanely fast, and you could go in snow and sand and wherever you wanted with that thing. It was a lot of fun, type of thing. Again, a big, giant two-stroke engine. Uh, yeah, so it was, and it was modified, of course. Yeah. So what else do we have here? Um, okay, so this wasn't mine, but this is a friend of mine's. The blue Polaris Razor, very highly modified. This is the type of machine that they race in the Baja 1000. And in fact, my friend's good buddy went to the Baja 1000 with one of these, and he came in seventh the first time they went. And then I think a couple of years later down the road, they went again, and he won the Baja 1000 in his class. So very, very high horsepower. This one's turbocharged. It's well over 200 horsepower. Again, like a Formula One car in the bush, essentially, insanely fast and a lot of fun. I can remember then I took this picture, and then that night I think he wanted to try and scare me. He's got a course that he teaches people to off road on with ATVs and all that kind of stuff. They used a big excavator to build, and it had this big jump on it. And I think he purposely did this. We went at night and did the jump. And he knew what he was doing, but I think he was trying to scare me a little bit. And he kind of did a little bit when we landed at night. We landed about 2 feet away from the trees and slid sideways and almost touched them as we rocketed off. So again, a lot of fun, a lot of adrenaline. What else have we got here? Okay, now this picture, this is something. I'll explain. Um, the three guys in the middle, the guy in the pink, the guy in the middle, and then the guy in the blue again. These are the three fastest men in history. It's called the Triple Crown, and to get a Triple Crown, and that's why there's only three of them. To get a Triple Crown, you have to be a Formula One world champion. You also have to be an IndyCar world champion, and you also have to have won the Indy 500 race. So all three of those guys, the guy in the pink is Jacques Villeneuve, the guy in the middle is Mario Andretti, and the guy in the blue is Emerson Fittipaldi. Again, the three fastest men in history. Now, the other guys, the guy in the hat is Sir Jackie Stewart. In fact, he was knighted because of his racing background. And the guy in the black is Juan Montoya Fabio, I think. I might have that wrong, but he was an IndyCar racer. And this picture was actually taken by a guy that I know, that I went to school with, although he was a couple of years younger than I was, from Penticton, who ended up being a very close friend of Jacques Villeneuve's. They actually met in racing school a long, long time ago. And they formed a partnership, and they built, it's called Area 27. And essentially, it's a racetrack. Uh, it's not quite a Formula One track, but it is a racetrack on that type of caliber that they built in the South Okanagan near Oliver, BC. And this picture was taken by the guy that is Jacques Villeneuve's business partner in this venture. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Area 27 and Jacques Villeneuve and whatnot. But again, the three fastest men in history. This picture was taken by the guy that's Jacques Villeneuve's business partner down at the Florida Formula One. I think it was the very first Florida Formula One. It might have been in like 2022 or somewhere around there, I believe. Yeah. So that's very, very cool. And I think we're going to go on to, yeah, so this is actually Area 27, and this is the racetrack, that Jacques Villeneuve and the guy that I know built. And it's basically, it's like a private golf course where only members can go in, but it's a racetrack. So you buy membership, and then that gives you access to the racetrack and to the clubhouse and to all the facilities. In fact, there's a gate, and if you don't have the code, you don't get in. So I was lucky to get in there because I know another guy. In fact, the guy in the black shirt that built that engine, he's good friends with the guy that is Jacques Villeneuve's business partner. And I think it was in summer of 2022, we went down there and checked everything out, which was really awesome. So I think the next one is just going to show Jacques Villeneuve again with Area 27. It's called Area 27 because Jacques' number when he was a Formula One racer was 27. So it's kind of a homage to Area 51, kind of. And I didn't tell Jacques this, but I told the guy that's Jacques' business partner, I told him that when the hover cars come out, the first thing I want to do is start racing them, and maybe we could race them around your race course. So, that when they come out, that'll be a whole new racing series, no doubt. So that's kind of cool. What else have we got here today for everyone? Yeah, so when I went down to the racetrack that summer of 2022, this was one of the cars that was just filling up at the gas pump. So I just took a picture of it. It's not a Formula One car. It's got a much smaller engine in it, way less horsepower, but it is very, very similar to a Formula One car in all its chassis and essentially everything except for the engine. Can't remember what class they called this, but very, very, very fast cars. And they raced on Area 27 the day that I was there. There was a whole bunch of them that came down and to do that. So I think the next one just shows a little bit more of a picture of the rear suspension and whatnot back there. Very, very high technology. The Formula One cars are all built of carbon fiber. This one's probably not completely all carbon fiber like the Formula One cars, but it definitely has a lot of carbon fiber. The suspension, I never actually looked, but I think it's probably aluminum. Those wishbones and whatnot for the suspension there. So I was interested in it. I thought I'd take a picture. Yeah, what else have we got? We got some more cool stuff to show you here. Yeah, now we're going to get into helicopters because that's also kind of my passion and background. And that picture of that's me in the darker coat and my best friend Al, the helicopter pilot, right beside me there. That picture was taken on Blue Joint Mountain when Al took his mountain training. And mountain training, in Al's words, is how not to get killed in a helicopter. Mountains are very, very difficult to fly in because of all the thermals and the winds and the way that everything works. So there is a very special school, in fact, the most elite helicopter training school in the world, that Al took the course, and that's one of the days that we're out landing on high altitude stuff. Al also worked for Aero Arctic and Canadian, which you can see there. That's a Canadian helicopter. And this was just out of Penticton. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple more of these slides. So let's see what else we have for everyone here. Yeah, this is Al. He lives down in Texas. This is one of his, I believe it was one of his personal helicopters with him standing there beside his house. He lives out in an acreage out there. So he just lands his helicopter, there whenever I think he went for lunch or something, he told me, or something like that. Or maybe he brought it home because it's easier to just take your helicopter home and then fly back to wherever you're working from. So he would do a lot of that. I believe that he landed on his property so much, the FAA actually put a little pin in there, and they called it Al's Place. So there was a thing that called it Al's Place down in Texas. He's outside of Houston, Texas. Yeah, and so what else have we got? We've got, okay, now this picture is wild. This is Al again, and another guy. There were two pilots in there. They would take turns kind of flying, because what happened was, this is in the high Arctic, and that is a hovercraft that they're towing that got broken down, and I think it was 40 miles of ice they had to pull this thing. So that's basically a picture of them pulling it. And the reason why the helicopter is the way it is because they're pulling so hard that the torque is actually causing the helicopter to do that. And I talked to Al and I said, how close were the rotor blades in the helicopter to the water when you were doing that? And he said they were about 10 or 15 feet. Now, I believe they actually had to tow this thing for a couple days. So this was hours and hours and hours. And what you see the reflection of lights in the rotor blades. And what that is, and this picture was actually taken from this icebreaker, the back of this icebreaker that was breaking the ice so that these guys could pull it more easily and whatnot, and also making sure that, someone was there in case something happened, essentially. He also told me that I think they landed in the water and refueled, and they had to refuel a whole bunch of times because the helicopter was working so hard. I actually sent this picture to Chris Beskar, the CEO of Stavati Aerospace, and I think he was pretty impressed with it. It's a very, very famous helicopter picture all across the world, in fact. A lot of helicopter pilots have seen this picture before, but that's Al flying. Yeah, he was an amazing helicopter pilot. He's retired now. Yeah. So what else have we got here today? Okay, now I was talking about the helicopter training facility. If you can maybe just go, yeah, okay, that's perfect. It changed. It was called Canadian Helicopters when Al took the course, but now it was taken over by a New Zealand company. I think it was called HNZ, and it's called Top Flight Elite Helicopter Training. So why I say it's the most elite helicopter training facility in the world is pretty simple. When I was there one day, I think it was that day we took that picture with me and Al in the Canadian helicopter. I was walking down the hallway and I saw these pictures, like school graduation pictures, and that's what they were. There were these graduating classes, and they were all military, and there were hundreds of them. So I said, "What's up with this, guys?" And then they told me, they said that all Canadian, U.S., British, and a lot of foreign military are all trained at this facility and have been since the 50s for high altitude training. So, and high altitude training or flying in the mountains is absolutely the hardest thing you'll ever do in a helicopter. So this is in Penticton, British Columbia, Canada. I do know all the guys here. In fact, when I went there, I gave him a big book on Stavati Aerospace, subquantum kinetics, anti-gravity, a whole bunch of stuff. So they've got a big binder there about it. And I think the next picture will just show, I think, yeah. So this is just when you come in the entrance, and there's one of the helicopters sitting out on the thing there that they fly. I think they're Bell. Yeah, they're the new Bell helicopters that are fly-by-wire, and they're not like the old school helicopters that Al flew back in the day. So what else have we got here?
I think that's it.
Oh, that's it. Okay, yeah. So that's basically that's it. Is my interest in racing essentially led to me having to learn how to modify these engines and machine things. And that was always high on my radar, even before I took mechanical engineering. And then when I took mechanical engineering, we machined conventionally with lathes and milling machines and all that kind of stuff. But we also learned to CNC machine, so computer numerical control machining. The computer controls everything, and I did a bunch of that. I used to have a CNC router back in the day, and currently I'm working with the DMG Moire guys on kind of the next level state of the art machines that can do the CNC machining, but they can also spray metal. Or
Eddie,
another way of thinking
I
about
was
it.
going to say, do you want to say
Yeah.
something a little bit about free energy and your back and your knowledge of that and
Yeah, that's
how
that's
your
where
background relates to that?
that's
How your
exactly
back,
where I was gonna kind of headed with all of this stuff. Is So I'm working with the DMG Moray guys, and DMG Moray, they build the most awesome machines on the planet, basically. And I had a Zoom call meeting with them the other day, and in fact, Dr. Moray, who's in Japan, was so interested in what I'm doing, he actually had a bunch of questions for me. Now, I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but through the sales guy, I had to answer all of these questions about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And that leads into exactly what Brendan is talking about here. Um, we're trying to develop ways and machines that can create free energy prototypes, and there are certain materials that you need to work with and whatnot that aren't currently available. Because when I first talked to the DMG guys, I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I used to be a spray welder back in the day. It was one of the things that I did after I worked in that big giant machine shop. And spray welding is very similar to what's called DED, directed energy deposition, where you use a laser to melt powdered material and weld it continuously to
Mhm.
build up things. Brendan, think of it as a 3D printer for metal, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
essentially what it is, right?
To print
So
to create parts for
yeah,
machine.
to create parts and whatnot. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now, developing. I won't really tell you why we're developing it.
And
That'll
also,
be for another
I have a
time.
background in electronics. I took electronics exam when I was 14 years old, and a 16-year-old's exam, and also I did a BTEC national in electronics and electrical engineering
Oh wow,
for about a year.
cool.
And I also, but with my PhD, I had to start a project and see it through to its conclusion over three and a half years, and
Yep.
basically manage the project with the help of my supervisor and write up a thesis at the end to describe what we had achieved
Yeah.
and the science behind it.
That's amazing, and that actually leads into something that I forgot to talk about. My electronics background. I've never taken electronics ever in my life in school or whatnot, which probably helped me actually because I was very, very lucky. So my father was in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he was part of NORAD on the DEW line looking for missiles coming over from Russia in the high Arctic. And he was a radar guy, and radar is the highest level of electronics that you can have, high voltage, high usually uses vacuum tubes and whatnot. So I didn't learn anything from my father. We were just like water and oil. I never learned any electronics from him, but I did come across a guy named Deacon Erdick. And Deacon Erdick was also in the Cuban Missile Crisis as a radar guy,
Mm,
but he was in the Russian military as a
mm.
radar guy. So over the course of probably 20 years, Deacon mentored me in high voltage tube electronics, and I learned everything from him. And he was an absolute genius at electronics.
You were also
Yeah,
introduced to free energy through Carmen, so you were aware of it long before I was aware of it. So
yeah, definitely. We'll talk a little bit about that because his name is Bill Mueller, and it was Carmen's father. And I met Carmen in high school, and I knew both her parents very well. I used to go over there all the time. And Bill Mueller, he was actually in the Hitler Youth, not because he wanted to be, because they basically said you have to do this, but he was actually at Peenemünde, which was where the German secret space program was, and he actually physically saw the Nazi flying bell, which uses counter-rotating torsional fields to create anti-gravity. So he knew about this stuff, and we talked privately, and I knew never to talk about this stuff back in 1980 because that's when this was basically 19 probably 81 82 ish in there. And he also knew about charge clusters, because charge clusters are EVOs, exotic vacuum objects, from Ken Shoulder's work and John Hutchison's work.
That relates. Obviously, that's a theoretical side that relate, and the experimental side that relates to free energy and a whole range of other science.
Yep. Yeah, and it all relates back to subquantum kinetics too, right?
Genetics, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So on Sundays, like Brendan was saying, I have a physics group, and we're studying consciousness for one, but charge clusters or EVOs, because they are actually all one and the same. Paul Laviolette's theory of subquantum kinetics talks about etherons as being basically the smallest thing that there is, and it's these etherons that takes about 100 billion of them to form the Turing wave.
There's trillions of them make up a proton or a neutron or electron.
Let's talk about the electron, because I've said to Chris Beskar, I said that a etheron, charge cluster, and ball lightning are one and all the same. They're just fractals of each other, but I misspoke a little bit, because I should have said an etheron, an electron, and ball lightning are all one and the same. And basically that's the etherons come from subquantum kinetics. It takes, like you said, a trillion or so of these things, and they essentially create this Turing wave, which is just a standing wave pattern, and then so they build it, and then it disappears. So it's called
the atomic particle. The Turing wave and the soliton could be on a larger scale, but on the particle physics level, the soliton or the Turing wave or the soliton make up a subatomic particle, such as a neutron or a proton.
Yeah, and it's a reaction diffusion thing. So it comes in, it produces this wave, and then it disappears again.
And there's a fair amount of evidence to indicate that this is correct, not only in particle physics, and but also in astronomy, astrophysics, and astronomy.
Yes,
quite a lot of evidence. So Paul was studying this for 50 odd years, and he mounted up he mounted up. I think he had about 14 a priori predictions of his model that indicated that his model was on the right tracks.
Yeah, I think there were that many for subquantum kinetics, and then there was another almost that many for climate change and that type of thing.
Galactic superwaves.
Galactic superwaves and all of that. So really, there's almost not quite 30 of them in total. And over time, all of them came to fruition. And the other thing that's really important to know about Paul was he was an astrophysicist. So he looked at galaxies and the largest structures that there are. And then he was a quantum physicist. And Paul asked the most awesome question. He said, what makes up the quantum? And that's why it's called subquantum. So it's one level below it. And it's kinetics, because it's that Turing wave that appears.
He came across this reaction diffusion system, the brusselator, and by looking at the brusselator in chemistry, it then gave him his insight into the ether. That the ether he had an extra G component to the brusselator in chemistry, and applied that to the ether, and then found that this could explain not only the ether but the particles within the ether, and also this kind of like open system where it appears to break the laws of thermodynamics, which is able to explain continuous creation rather than creation from a big bang.
Yeah, I was about to just say that there's no big bang. It's a state of continuous creation.
There's quite a lot of serious evidence that it's not just an idle theory. There's quite a lot of evidence that he's a mountain.
Definitely. So every time that Turing wave comes in and forms that standing wave pattern, essentially, it literally is called the blinking universe. It literally recreates the entire universe and then goes on to the next picture frame, if you want to call it that, and so on and so on. So that continuous creation occurs. And because of that being there, you can go back and look at your Akashic records, which are kind of like a record of your soul's journey. And it's there because it's a continuous thing. So it's not like the Big Bang where it just did this. It's a continuous thing, essentially. And that's really important for people to know. Yeah. What else would you like to talk about before we finish here, Brandon?
I think we've covered a fair bit. You know, it's very interesting to
Yeah,
see your background and your machining and building engines and tuning engines and that and your metal work and spray welding. You know, you've had quite you taught yourself electronic. You taught yourself a lot about electronics and electrical systems, and you've learned a lot from being self-taught as well as being mentored by some other people who had in deep knowledge of it. You know,
exactly. And even to this day, I mean, I've interviewed Chris Beskar 5 times. You were with me on the fifth interview and the first one, for that matter. And Chris is a wealth of knowledge too, as is another guy. His name is David Wilcock, and David Wilcock, he's the director of advanced technologies at Stevati Aerospace. Chris Beskar is the CEO of Stevati Aerospace, and I've had contact with both these guys, and a lot to do with physics as well too. And they shared a ton of information with me over the last 4 years. Essentially, it's been a really long time. Chris Beskar, I think it's been a couple of years now, but David Wilcock goes back even further, kind of thing. So I just want to say thank you to them, and much gratitude for
oh,
everything they've done and everything that you do as well too, Brendan. So thank you.
thank you very
Yeah,
much, and yeah, thank you too because you've done a lot. You know, you're doing more recent in the last year or two. You've been working very doing producing a lot. You know.
yeah. Well, Chris Beskar basically gave us the golden key when he handed me all of Ken Shoulder's research, his patents, and all of these papers. And that's what we've been going through in the Sunday group, which is on Brendan's channel. It's a YouTube channel called BJD798. You can find all of the Ken Shoulders work there, stuff on Paul Laviolette, some of the simulations that you did on the particles are there. And we're going to continue to keep doing that. And you can find a whole bunch of stuff about me on my channel called Technology Envoy, my a YouTube channel called Technology Envoy. I believe I've got 4 interviews on there of the 6 that I did with Chris. Plus, we also had Chris. This is really special too. We need to talk a little bit about this. We had Chris Beskar in our Sunday group talking with us about physics and whatnot. And it is posted on my channel and yours, as a matter of fact. So really, I've kind of interviewed him 6 times now, and looking forward to the next ones. So thank you, Chris, and everyone at Stevati Aerospace. Huge gratitude to everything you're doing, because Stevati really is going to show you the technology in the next few years. And it is coming out of Stevati Aerospace, you guys, all of this work, because of Ken Shoulder and Chris Beskar's business relationship that they had with charge clusters, also known as EVOs. Yeah, so thank you everyone again for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers. Take care.
Yep,
Bye.
bye bye.